Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Sunday, September 21st, 2025, and on Sundays we talk about the purpose and meaning of life. And there's a little kitty cat who wants to say hello because I called for her and she came running over, so that must be a good sign. Her name is Lucy. Hello, Lucy. Can you say hello to everybody out there? She's eating, often hungry. In any event, so yeah, she wanted to say hello, and we're talking this week about planets, believe it or not. But let me get to that in just a moment here. A Pew Research Center poll earlier this year determined that about 30%, almost 1 in 3 U.S. citizens consult astrology, tarot cards, fortune tellers, that sort of thing. Full disclosure, I'm not one of them. It's not that I'm sort of agnostic in that regard. I'm always open to people's thoughts and beliefs and stories. But I'm not a person who consults my zodiac, my horoscope, that sort of thing, on any kind of regular basis. But I'll look at it, I'll listen to it, and see what people have to say. So, do you believe in astrology? Well, that's a good question, right? It's a big one because a lot of people do. In fact, 27% in that Pew Research poll said that they believe in astrology. Again, that's a study of the movement and relative positions of celestial bodies that are interpreted as basically having an influence on human affairs in the natural world. The main focus stems from the study of the sun and the moon, and mainly the observable planets. So first and foremost, of course, would be the sun and the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And then the other two of the 7 classical planets are Jupiter and Saturn. But of course, astrologists also sometimes consider other celestial phenomena as well as stars and even asteroids and especially the different kinds of comets, etc. Right, you name it. So anyway, how does all of this stuff affect the human condition? Does it affect the human condition? And of course, cultures everywhere have turned their gazes skyward, looking for signs how to interpret what's happening, with clear evidence of cultures dating back to ancient civilizations and really across every major civilization that's ever been documented. So yeah, we're going to address then the issue of planets in our solar system this week and the importance of planets in our lives, once again from several different perspectives. So for starters, whether we believe in astrology or not, we're all born on a certain day and under a zodiac sign, which means that from a physical standpoint, we're born in a certain relative position of the Earth compared to the sun. We're constantly circumnavigating the sun, and again, our birthdays coincide with that particular location each year. And if we factor in the year that we were born, that means then too specifically that the planets and the stars would have been in distinct alignment as well. So, for example, were some of the planets more clustered together the year that you were born, or were they spread further apart? Perhaps 1 or 2 planets aligned more closely. And in fact, we use the term quite often when we say, oh, well, something happened because the planets aligned just so. Right? So as for myself, I didn't know at the time, but I guess I was a little bit lucky. The gods of fate smiled upon me as I entered the world as we know it on the 16th of May, 1962. So what was so lucky about that? Well, at the time, a broad cluster of planets were within a 17-degree arc around the sun. So that involved all the visible planets: Mercury, Venus, of course, ourselves, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And this is a somewhat uncommon event because each planet obviously has its own orbital period. But the significance, at least in my case, was that the grouping together of the visible planets happened to coincide with astrological concerns about the approaching age of Aquarius. And that became quite a theme, especially with the hippie movement in the 60s and the 70s, that we were on the cusp of entering the next astrological age of Aquarius, a period of profound social and technological changes, ushering in a kind of a fundamental transformation of life on Earth. And the key features included, as the Fifth Dimension once sang, in '69, increased harmony and understanding, sympathy and trust abounding, and equality, and all of which is believed to be heralded by the movement of the vernal equinox into the Aquarius constellation. But of course, astrologers disagree. Some have argued that the age actually really started in 2012, but there's a huge span of hundreds of years in which astrologers argue that the true age of Aquarius may have started or will be starting, and so on. The 2012 figure stems from the fact that the star Regulus in the Leo constellation, which marked the ancient border between the constellations of Leo and Cancer, that Regulus had moved within 30 degrees of the September equinox point in 2012. And so that meant that Regulus then left the sign of Leo to enter the sign Virgo that same year. And again, if you presume equal-sized constellations in antiquity, then that would place the border of the constellations of Pisces and Aquarius at 150 degrees west of Regulus, or the March equinox point. And so by that reckoning, then, again, if you follow that logic, the age of Aquarius would have started in 2012. And besides, 2012 also marked the discovery of the bacterial immune system CRISPR that could be used to edit DNA. And so that's kind of big news too. But are we in a new age? Are we on the cusp of some grand historic transformation? Well, who really knows? But what I can say with confidence as a social scientist with a PhD and an ABD, almost a second PhD, is that at least from a generational standpoint, we all tend to share the conceit that we're living in the most critical time in history. And it's actually and literally true in at least one sense. From a purely selfish standpoint, right now sort of has to be the most important period because it's the one in which we're alive right now. It's the one that we all get to experience. So at least from our perspective, of course it's important. And to the best of our knowledge, or at least setting aside certain belief systems like Hinduism, it's our only chance to be here. Our only kick at the can, so to speak. So yes, it's a pretty important period then to be alive, since it's the only one that we'll ever know, at least in this form. Okay, but can any of this stuff, and can astrology, can the alignment of the planets affect who we are as people? Well, many believe that our personalities are tied, at least in part, to our natal birth charts and zodiac signs. Maybe you're among them. And I'm sure we've all, at some point, read, our horoscopes. And by the way, apparently my birth date, if you go back in time, would indicate that I'm a, quote, natural communicator with a private reflective core, end quote. That's kind of eerily accurate, I think, but in any event. But are we the byproducts then of these unseen forces of the universe writ large, or the alignment of the stars in the sky and the alignment of the planets in our solar system? So for me, that's a little bit like asking, are we free to do as we like as human beings? And do we have free will? Or are we somehow the subjects to forces that are unseen, that are operating behind the scenes, behind the curtain, like the Great Oz? Or is there a God that's sort of setting the parameters of our behavior, or the devil, for that matter, intervening in our world? Or the planets, then, exerting some kind of pull or influence? Well, as a scientist, I can't really answer that question. But what I do know is that human beings in every known civilization have tried to make sense out of life and death, out of the purpose and meaning of life, and the possible meanings of our great sun and the moon in the sky, and of course as well the planets that are circling around us, sometimes nearby, sometimes much further away, and so on. So there's an obvious physical reality of these planets and our sun and our moon, and these directly affect some aspects of what we physically experience. The sun far more than anything else, of course, which I've talked about extensively in other vlogs, but the moon too, with the ocean tides, etc. And then the other planets exert some gravitational pull, to be sure, and may have other effects as well. But to me, the most important impacts are those that human beings construct in terms of our meaning systems. How do we interpret the planets? And if we believe that something has an effect on us, then that can certainly directly shape how we respond to what's happening in the world around us. And if we believe things that are, if we think of things as real, then there are real consequences that tend to follow. Okay. So, for example, early this morning, I got a coffee today at our national chain. It's not officially, but I guess it's unofficially, Tim Hortons. So, and there was a guy who was sitting there outside, just past through the drive-through, and he seemed to be genuinely struggling. Okay, I mean, almost to survive. Again, this is just my impression. He was quite dirty. He had torn clothing, along with a couple of personal items, and so on. But he definitely didn't seem to be thriving. Let me put it that way. Okay. And again, I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I'm just, as a human being, I came upon another human being. It happens all the time. Perhaps, you too. We all see people who are in need, or we see people, at street corners with signs or stoplights and that sort of thing, asking for money. And I sometimes give to those people if I have some change or what have you, but not all the time. In fact, most of the time, I just don't even have any money, or at least no cash or change as such. Anyway, early this morning, for whatever reason, this guy's appearance got to me. Okay? I'm guessing he was about my age, but maybe he was 10 or 20 years younger, for all I know, and maybe he's just suffered the ravages of life, etc. I don't know. And for whatever reason, I sensed that he was really struggling. And I mean, not to be overly dramatic, but almost like, was he dying? I didn't think that literally be the case. I probably would have called 911 if I really truly thought that. But nonetheless, he just seemed to be at this sort of, like, almost on the precipice of some kind, right? Anyway, so again, and to be clear, I might have been completely wrong in my assessment, right? But I had 50 cents. I had a couple of quarters on me, which is somewhat rare. And so as I, exited the drive-through and I went by this guy, I stopped, and he was literally sitting there kind of on the side of this little sidewalk there. Okay. And I had my window down still. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry, but I've only got 50 cents, but you can have it." And I held out the 50 cents to him, right? Fine. And he reached up and he just quietly said, he looked at me and he said, "Well, that's fine. God bless you." And he gave a slight smile with his mouth closed. And, that was fine. But I don't know how to explain this, but in that moment, in that one brief exchange, it's like I saw the whole of humanity in that one, aging, hungry, shoddily clad gentleman. And I felt like, and maybe this was his last day on earth, or I don't know, maybe he had 20 more years ahead of him. Who knows? But something inside me connected and told me I had to help this man. I had to stop. It's a strange feeling, but every once in a while I get that, that's what happened. And so I asked then also if he needed food, which he responded no, because apparently the guy just before me, had given him part of his meal. And then he showed me the breakfast sandwich that the guy had given him. And I thought, oh, wow, that's lovely, right? And now I'd given him a little bit of money. Anyway, I didn't call 911. I didn't stay any longer. He seemed in some ways to be almost quietly content with where he was in his life and with this, with the situation and so on. And again, maybe he was genuinely fine. Or maybe he'd had a really rough night, or maybe he was coming down from drugs, or who knows what. But at that moment, and after I gave him the money and he had his food and he had some water as well, everything sort of seemed to be aligning just right. Okay. And maybe, this was the end of the summer, right? The official end, I guess, happens tomorrow. So today's the 21st. So on September 22nd, that's the autumnal equinox, right? At least in the northern hemisphere. It indicates, I should say, the end of summer, the start of fall. Okay, technically at 2:19 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Okay. I'm supposed to be teaching, by the way, in the afternoon, and that ends at 2:20, technically. So I'll be sure to do something with the class or make mention of this, remind them of the start of autumn, and definitely let them out of class early so that they can enjoy the transition. Okay, so what I want to do today then is just end briefly by talking about the horoscopes for today. Okay, and again, this is something that I don't usually do, so let's enjoy though. So if today's your birthday, although there's a beautiful solar eclipse at the start of your birthday week, there's also a tough looking Sun Saturn link that warns you that you cannot take anything for granted. In a nutshell, the harder you work, the more successful you will be, and that success could be huge. Good advice to all of us, right? Aries. So if you're born between March 21st and April 20th, as the sun moves into your opposite sign this week, you may have to let go of your place in the spotlight. It won't hurt to let others take the lead for a while, so step back and let loved ones and workmates show what they can do. Okay. Taurus, that's me, between April 21st and May 21st. Cosmic activity in the work and well-being area of your chart will encourage you to knuckle down and finish those projects you started but never got quite around to completing. It may surprise you to discover just how many there are. Well, no, it won't surprise me. I'm always aware of just how many things I've got on the go. Gemini, May 22nd to June 21st. You have worked long and hard to get to a position where you can show the world what you're capable of doing, and those efforts must not be wasted. Make it your one and only aim this week to prove you are not just good, but great. Lovely. Cancer, June 22nd to July 23rd. There will be times this week when it seems as if nothing quite fits the way it should, but if you stay calm, make the most of new opportunities, you won't be confused for long. Mars will inspire you to be creative in more forceful ways. All right, for the Leos among you, July 24th to August 23rd, you won't hesitate to let everyone around you know what you think and how you feel. And if they don't like much, well, that's too bad. Life is too short to pull your punches, especially when dealing with people whose views you don't agree with. All right, but do so respectfully, okay, Leos? Virgos, August 24th to September 23rd. Although the sun's now leaving your sign, you still have Mercury there to guide your choices and keep your spirits high. Remember, to be a success in life depends not just on getting things right, but also on avoiding making stupid decisions. All right, the Libras that are coming up, September 24th to October 23rd. A new solar cycle is beginning, and the sun is in your sign over the next few weeks will encourage you to make bigger and better plans than ever before. You must, of course, make sure your aims are practical, they must be ambitious as well. Okay, Scorpios. As Mars moves in your favor, your approach to getting things done will become more direct. You have a reputation for playing your cards close to your chest, but you no longer have the patience for that. Everyone must know what you expect of them. So take charge, Scorpios. Sagittarius. You may think, this is November 23rd to December 21st, you may think that your way of doing things is the best way, and you may be right, but it will pay you to be more open to other people's ideas. You may be surprised to find that some people are not the idiots that you thought they were. Okay. Capricorns, December 22nd to January 20th. The sun's change of signs will bring major changes on the work front, changes that you're very well placed to take advantage of. While your rivals are panicking about the future, you will be looking forward to your next big career move. Whoa. Aquarius, who are January 21st to February 19th. You have never been the sort to play it safe, and as the sun moves into the most adventurous area of your chart, you will be even less inclined to be cautious. Life is what you choose to make of it, so make it a fun-filled roller coaster experience. And then finally, Pisces, as we complete the cycle, February 20th to March 20th. If you've been worrying about your financial situation in recent weeks, you will soon get the chance to do something about it. Be aware of new technologies and how they can help you save money and help you make money as well. All right, so that's it. Much more to say about the planets, so tune in tomorrow. We're going to be looking at some planetary facts and statistics. And then we'll look at the planets on Tuesday in terms of music and the arts, and then much more the rest of the week. In the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance as we hopefully enter the age of Aquarius. See you soon.